We will get started in roughly 1 minute. We have a few more people popping in, so we'll get started here in about 30 seconds. Bob, we're seeing your control bar at the bottom.
What? Where did that come from?
All right, it looks like we have a quorum. So good afternoon and welcome to our monthly webinar, Demand Trends for Higher Education. These are the results through October of this year. As always, a few housekeeping things to start with. At the bottom, please put any Q&A into the Q&A section. That way other people can upvote the questions they have. As far as chat, please use that. We will always, as always, we'll be opening up the system towards the end of this webinar to look at programs you'd be interested in. Feel free to drop a program in there and Winnell will pull it up for you. If you want to, raise your hand and we can also, that'll help us identify you on the chat as possible. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our CEO and author, Robert Gray Atkins.
Hi, everybody. This is Bob Atkins. I'm the CEO and founder here at Gray. And as Ned mentioned, very excited about my new book, Start, Stop, or Grow, that describes how to do program evaluation. And I'll walk you through a couple of the ideas there, but mostly today I'm going to share data on what happened through October 2022 and the trends that we see. First things first, as I mentioned, a core concept in the book is something called a program evaluation system, what we call PES. Now, many of you may use labor market databases and folks sometimes think those are PESs. That's a part of a PES, and it's an important part, but it isn't a PES. In order to have a full program evaluation system, you need to have robust data on markets, which includes not only labor, but student demand, because students fill seats and pay the tuition. So if you don't have a good understanding of student demand, you're very likely to run into problems with, for example, enrollment. And of course, competition fits there. Then you've got to understand the margins on your programs and which ones generate margins to substitute important mission critical programs that don't cover their own costs. And then we got to understand if the program is consistent with your academic standards, what percentage of students are getting D, Fs, or Ws? What's the retention rate? What's the completion rate for a given program? And are they passing any external tests required? For example, in nursing, they have to take the NCLEX. And what is your pass rate? And is that acceptable for your institution? And of course, it's worthwhile checking whether it's acceptable for the Board of Nursing as well. And finally, mission is a critical dimension. Now, one we've added since I wrote the book that I think is quite important is DEI. You may ask, what's the linkage between DEI and program choices? Great question. What we found is that each program has what I call a demographic fingerprint. That is, it attracts a unique constellation of gender and ethnicities. And I'll take a simple example. Again, nursing, 90% female. I'm not arguing it should be 90% female. Please, it's a good job that many guys should aspire to, but nonetheless, it skews female and actually skews minority as well. So when you're making program decisions, you're consciously or unconsciously deciding what your student body is going to look like for the next 5, 10, 15 years, as long as you have that program. So you want to keep track of that and make sure that if as many campuses are, you're short of men, that you think about programs that you could offer that will increase the male population on your campus. I say that because men right now are about 40% of students on campus, and women are about 60%. And keep in mind that more complex gender identification is not yet supported by IPED, so I can't actually speak to other variations on those on that particular dimension. Now, it's not enough just to have the data. In order to make good decisions, you've got to create a process that is open, data informed, and it's a phrase of the day, transparent, where people understand what's going on, what the rules of the game are, their consistent criteria, and so forth. And of course, the right people have to be involved in evaluating the programs that are put forward. So that combination of people and process is a critical part of an overall program evaluation system. And that extends on to into, same basic principles into program management as well. Now, in addition to doing PES, we do a few other things I just want to make you all aware of. We help clients optimize their prices. We help them optimize where they put locations, whether that's a location for a mini campus or where they choose to spend money marketing their programs. And finally, we're building up a financial planning model that allow you to simulate events and decisions across the entire enterprise of higher ed, so including sports and dorms, but importantly, very rich in ability to simulate academic decisions, things like minimum class size or which programs you offer. Now, as Ned mentioned, after my presentation is done, we'll fire up our program evaluation system and take requests for program scorecards so you can have a look at a program that's of interest to you. So if you have a program in mind, please do let us know in the chat. We may not be able to get to you right away. If we don't, we will email you a copy of the scorecard for that program during this week. Without further ado, let's actually talk about some trends in the marketplace. And we're going to start with Google search data. And we're going to touch on 3 different sources of information on student demand: Google search, international, enrollment, and non-degree courses. On the Google side, we track this over time, and the blue bars are the 2021 data, and the dark blue bars are 2021. The light blue bars are 2022. Apologies for the confusion. So we're trying to find light blue bars that are taller than dark blue bars, i.e. the market and Google search volumes are growing. And we just snuck over the bar this month, up 0.4%. So it is positive, but not by much. I'd really call this flat. And it's trending down. We were growing 10% back in May, over 10% in June. Then it began to narrow in July. August is down to 5%, then 3% in September. And now we're essentially flat. So this is a little worrisome. If this trend continues, we're going to start to see numbers that are actually lower than prior year. And that will ripple forward for you all into lower enrollment numbers 6 to 9 months from now. Do keep in mind as we track Google search that it's not telling you, in a sense, what your enrollment is or what the trend enrollment is this minute. Google's actually looking forward because these students are beginning their search. So they're not actually going to enroll in school for another 3-6 months at undergraduate levels, and in graduate school, often it's another 9 to 12 months before they really get serious. So this is a forward-looking indicator, and it's showing a little bit of weakness. Now, within that, which programs had the highest volume of keyword searches? The first 2 are not surprising: registered nursing, business administration, 2 largest programs in the country, very consistently at the top of this list. But I do 2 essentially new programs in the last 5 years are doing extremely well: cybersecurity and data analytics. Between the 2 of them are the equivalent size of business. And you'll see later on, these continue to grow. So these have become some of the largest programs in the United States in terms of student interest. Then we have social work, psychology, law, physical therapy therapist, which, as many of you know, is both undergraduate and runs all the way through doctoral level, fine arts, and medicine. What's growing fastest? I mentioned that data analytics and cybersecurity were hot. They are. Not only are they amongst the 10 biggest programs, but they are by far the fastest growing programs with 404% and 208% growth, respectively, in Google search volumes. So I would expect to continue to see growth and enrollment in those programs in the future. Then we get to kind of an assortment of things. The helping professions in the light blue here, up 113%, registered nursing up 69%. And that's interesting to me because I've heard recently of enrollment issues with registered nursing and that beginning to decline. So this would suggest that the enrollment in registered nursing is going to perk up if we look forward. And then finally in the helping, we have substance abuse and addiction counseling. Obviously a huge topic in the United States for the last several years. Wish it weren't, but still an area of great interest for students to learn about those fields. And then we have the arts. We have cinematography, film production, fine studio arts, and speech communication and rhetoric. The one here that's been really catching my eye recently is cinematography. This is persistently amongst our top 10 in terms of growth. So I think there's enough consistency in that trend to believe it's real and substantial. And we have a couple of other things that made the list: Homeland Security and Library and Information Services, Science, excuse me. Now let's, for a moment, take our eyes off the US and see what international
Actually, Bob,
students
before you
want.
move,
Yeah.
before you move on, I've got a quick question. Interest numbers for PT, just got a report that PT applications are down 40% for this year. This is from Paul.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I mean, part of the question is timeframes. So the applications are probably looking at folks who were, thinking about this and enrolling now 3-4 months ago, and applying several months before that. So that may be, I haven't checked those trends, but that could be consistent, in fact, with what we've seen. What we're seeing now is what's showing up in Google as interest, for next fall, if you will. So I don't know when you say, and please clarify, if in enrollment you mean students applications for next year, then the data is just out of sync with that. I don't know. I don't know why. If it's last year's applicants and enrollment, then we could just be dealing with a timing difference. But I've never actually heard, doctoral level could also be a degree level question. Actual enrollment declines seem far-fetched to me because there's been such a surplus of people who wanted to take that program relative to the supply of seats. So again, I'd have to see the data, but historically, those programs are turning people away because the seats are constrained by the regulators. Looking at international, this is a bright spot. Now the growth is slowing down a little bit, but we were up 20% in July, 35% in August, 21% in September. That puts 10% growth in a little bit of context. It's actually a slowing growth rate, but still a very healthy growth rate in international interest in US programs. What programs are they looking for? Well, business is not a surprise. And here you see tech takes 5 of the top 10 slots in terms of interest. Data science, computer science, business analytics, computer software engineering, computer and information system security, all in the top 10, all very heavily tech focused. Then we have kind of an assembly of other stuff: engineering, health services, marketing management, and digital marketing. Always keep in mind with international students, they tend to focus in STEM fields because it's a better path to a US visa. Business had the highest number of 2020 international completions, and followed by some similar areas, computer science as an example. But we do have some more general areas as well: finance, economics, mathematics, mechanical engineering, psychology, econometrics, accounting, electrical and electronics engineering, and biology and biological sciences. Still very much by and large STEM fields, but a little bit more diversified out of tech than the international page views are right now. And again, that's probably a timing thing. I think we're looking at the change between what students wanted when they enrolled a few years ago and what they're looking for right now. Where are people interested in going? The colors here are a little counterintuitive. The blue is low interest, light blue is a little bit more, and then orange and red are high interest. So you can see on the right-hand side of the map that Massachusetts is hot in terms of international interest, and California is really a solid number 2 this month. Normally California smokes New England, but this time we got them. Now, where are the originating countries? This has actually changed a lot this month. Normally towards the top of this list, I'll see Nigeria and Iran, and neither one of those are even on the list this month. So, and this is for marketing. Vietnam is number 1, Turkey's number 2, India's number 3. You see Brazil, Bangladesh, and so forth. I'm always surprised by some of the small countries that make the top 10 here. And some countries where the income levels are extremely depressed, like Bangladesh, but nonetheless looking for US, some folks are looking for US education. Now let's turn to enrollment. So this is what actually happening. The data are from spring 2022. And we've talked about this before. A little bit of bad news here. New student enrollment was down 5%, and at the master's level down 7%. After having a little bit of growth there between 20 and 21, we gave that up between 21 and 22. Total enrollment still up though. And so that's students are staying in school, and the growth in enrollment from last year is still flowing through the system. So bachelor's level, we're up a tiny bit, 0.4%, master's level up 2%. What's going on here? Business is the biggest program. That's not surprising. Again, the top two here, no surprise. This is bachelor's level, business and registered nursing. Psychology is also in the top three. And then you see biology, and now we start to pick up computer sciences, some of the tech stuff, accounting, mechanical engineering, and then we've got a couple of other things. I'm always worried about criminal justice programs. They typically make the top 10. They're very popular with students. The outcomes are not good. In particular, pay is not good. And there are not very many jobs directly in the field, but that's fine. You look at this list, there are not very many jobs in psychology either, but only 4% of psych majors end up in fields that are directly related to psychology. But they go on to get jobs in other areas and earn actually about the average for college graduates, so 50th percentile or so. Now, among bachelor's programs, data science actually grew the fastest. So again, already a big program, and now, but sustaining very rapid growth. Experimental psychology was up, conservation biology, electrical and computer engineering, human-computer interaction. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Then we have a series of media and communications majors, and this is what surprised me. Communication management and strategic communications up 53%. Recording arts tech up 37%, intermedia multimedia up 32%, sports communication up 32%, and music technology up 31%. Think of this as to me, these are all complements at cinematography and what are technical art, if you will. That is art that requires an underlying layer of technology to produce it. You can see there's a lot of interest in that here, as well as communications in general. At the master's program level, the view is quite different. We still have business at the top, really, but in a walk away in terms of enrollment with 352,000 students enrolled. Second is social work at 112,000. Here again, I have some real concerns. The pay for social work is very low. You're talking about mid-career earnings, about $50,000. So I think schools need to be extremely attentive to what they're charging in tuition for a master's program in social work, so that the student has a reasonable chance of being able to pay the loans off at graduation. Then we see a couple of just other, computer science and registered nursing up here in the top. Business, we see striking again with business analytics. And then it's education with 3 slots: educational leadership, education general, and special ed teaching general. And finally, we have counseling with school counseling, guidance services, and counseling psychology as 2 of the largest at the master's level. What's fastest growing? Okay, this is getting tiresome. Here's data science again. This is, as hot as it can get. The only thing I've seen around that I don't see here at this moment is actually data security. Cybersecurity has been on a tear from a good size in the first place. Here we see other tech, artificial intelligence, information technology, project management, computer science, and computer systems analysts. And then kind of a random group of other things: sustainability studies, multiple disabilities education, biostatistics, and industrial engineering. Now, many of you have come to us in the last 24 months and said, look, I understand about degrees and we're looking at those, but an awful lot of the interest we're hearing about in the market is for non-degree courses and certificates. So we went out to try and find some data that could give you a sense of the relative size and growth of areas and specific courses in this non-degree space. The data we found is Coursera and Udemy. And fortunately, Coursera publishes enrollments in its programs. This first chart is total enrollment since the inception of the program. But we keep track of that number by month, so we can also see how that enrollment changed month over month and share that with you as well. I find it interesting that 2 of the top areas are personal growth. I would have thought tech would be at the top of the list, but the science of well-being is in first place by a ways, and learning how to learn is in third place. Then interestingly, we have English for career development. Now, my guess is most of the students taking this are international students who need to use English in the workplace. And you can see that's reinforced by speak English professionally a little bit further down and write professional emails in English. Again, my hypothesis is that this is primarily foreign students, but based on my experience with recent college grads and writing, it's very possible there are a great many Americans, US students, who should be taking these same programs and brushing up their communication skills. Then we get to some tech, Python for everybody, neural networks and deep learning, not surprising. In either case, they've been on this list for ages. Tech, foundations of user experience as well. And finally, a couple of just other things, child nutrition and COVID-19 contact tracing. And I'm going to put in my wish that we could put this COVID thing behind us, and that number will start to fall, and we won't need people to trace contacts anymore. But having just gotten COVID myself about a week ago and gotten over it, it's still with us. And as I say, I can't hope strongly enough that we put that one in the rearview mirror. So in terms of what's growing, speak English professionally is number one. Then we got introduction to psychology, is a very semi-random group of things in this group. We've got another English for career development growing very fast. Then we get foundations of user experience, data everywhere, positive psychiatry and mental health. This is we're calling that what we talked about before about well-being being important. What is data science? Then interestingly, we have two here where the course actually taught in a foreign language, which we don't normally see at the top of the list. Apologies for my Spanish, but nutrición y obesidad is one, and finanzas personales is another. And finally, we have project management, which often makes the list, with 590,000 increase in enrollment in October versus a year before. Now, Udemy is kind of a different platform, and here we tend to see more pure tech. And you can see at the top, we've got development, that's software development, IT and software. Then we do have business, design, teaching, marketing. And interestingly, even on Udemy, personal development is one of the larger disciplines. And here are examples of a couple of courses within this discipline that are trending: Be Happier with Positive Psychology and Certified Alternative Healing. So again, if you're looking for less than degree programs or courses, these are the kinds of things that are really of interest to students right now. Now that you have this other problem, which is not only do you need students, but they need to get jobs at the end. So let's take a look at what's going on in the employment market. And the news looks really negative here, down 26% year over year in job postings in the US. But it's not as bad as it looks. That black bar is 3 years ago, and you can see it gradually rising, but I would say March last year was the last normal month we've had pre-COVID. And we're still well ahead of that in terms of total job postings. So, we're trending down back towards those 2020 numbers. We're not quite there yet. We're way off the 2020 numbers, or 2021 numbers, but those were very inflated by the recovery from COVID. So in a sense, that's not a fair comparison. And as all of you have heard, the job market continues to be very strong. We'll see if the current weakness in tech, many of you have heard companies like Amazon cutting tens of thousands of workers, that may lead to softness in here that will get us back down below what I would call growth levels. We're not quite there yet. In October, registered nursing had the highest number of job postings with 195,000 postings. That is very worrisome. If you need care, you're looking at a number that's a very substantial percentage of all the nurses currently working. So that's a very high job posting number and consistent with the shortage of nurses that we've experienced during and after COVID. Then we have general and operations managers. Actually, managers do really well on this list as a whole. We got general and operations managers, first-line supervisors of admin workers, first-line supervisors of operating workers, and first-line supervisors of sales workers. So a lot of jobs for managers, and in particular, first-level managers in organizations. Then it becomes a little bit more random: computer user support specialists, social and human services assistants, and tax preparers. Keep an eye on tax preparers. This is going to be hot for a while. The IRS is hiring 87,000 tax auditors. I don't know where they're going to find all those people, but there's going to be a very robust market for people to get hired by the IRS as tax examiners. And then that's going to in turn create a whole string of demand for people to help with taxes, because there are going to be more audits. People are going to have to be more rigorous with how they file and so forth. So I think this one is here for a while. Whether it lasts out, 5 or 10 years, I don't know. But I think for the next 2 or 3 years, we're going to see this. We're seeing it very consistently month over month now in terms of job growth. I shouldn't ignore human resources. Still on the list amongst the top 10. What's growing fastest? And this is unit growth. General and operations managers. And again, we see 3 levels of managers: first line and construction managers here as well. Then we get a couple of finance, tax preparers, financial managers, accountants, and auditors. And then other, and registered nursing, computer support specialists, social and human services assistants, and human resources specialists. Remember, this is unit growth, so you're generally only going to see things on here that are pretty big to start with, but also experiencing unit growth. And when we look back here, for nursing, we had 195,000 job postings, but growth of 77,000. So that not only is very big in terms of job postings, but we've got a third more job postings than we had a year ago. So very rapid growth there, and a lot of difficulty, I suspect, filling those jobs. Now we're going to take a venture into a new space. What many of you are trying to figure out how to grow your institutions. And so everybody knows I want to write another book, and I want it to be about growth. So as I began to do a little bit of research on this, one of the things I finally figured out, you'd think I'd have known this, is that one of the paths to growth for an institution is actually sports. And we've had the privilege of working with one college to do the full numbers on their sports programs. That is not just the cost and revenue generated by the sport itself, but importantly, all the costs and revenue generated in the academic side of the house by athletes. And when we looked at those numbers at D3 school, turns out sports are a very important contributor to the health of the academic enterprise. They bring in a lot of tuition money, and oftentimes, if you don't have the sport that students want, they're going to go someplace else where they can play and get an education. So sports turns out to be a really interesting growth lever that also is highly contribution positive in most cases. Now, I'm going to make an exception here. We're not really going to talk about D1, Notre Dame and its schedule and all the TV revenue it gets, and a stadium that can hold 100,000 people. We're really talking about college athletics more at the D2, D3 level as I go through here. But some of the smaller D1s would fit this profile as well. So what's going on? Well, total participants, D1, 2020 to 2021. Football was actually up 35,000. That's a lot of students coming in playing football. All track women also up over 30,000. Then we let's just walk through the men's sports here for a minute. All track combined, baseball for men up 25,000, soccer for men up 12, basketball for men up 11, and that is our last male contingent. Then we've got amongst these top fastest growing, we actually have 1, 2, 3. We have 6 that are women's sports: all track, soccer, softball, basketball, and then that last one is miscolored, but volleyball women has also gained over 10,000 students in this period. So it has over 10,000 students in this period. So these are very large programs that are putting a lot of money into the academic side of the house. But not all of that translates directly into profits. We've got some very expensive sports here, and you can see the men's sports top the list. Basketball, diving, football, and hockey all over $80,000 per participant. I suspect much of that is travel, but that doesn't explain all of it. You've also got some of these sports have a ton of coaches, football in particular, and other expenses as well. But we have some women's sports who are pushing some pretty high numbers per participant as well. Golf, we're working up from the bottom, tennis, gymnastics, diving, ice hockey, and basketball. I can tell you, though, that there's enormous variation around these costs. At the low end for football, I was talking with a school that's going to do it for $600 per student. So it can be done if you're a small school at much lower cost than you're seeing here. Highest growth, baseball. For men, I'll run down the men's side again. Soccer, up 914, football, 607, and all track combined men, 398. But you'll notice that only 4 of the highest growth sports are men. So it's actually women who are taking most of the spots in terms of growth, with soccer, softball, volleyball, track and field, indoors, and then swimming and diving and women's lacrosse. Let's see. This is the real naughty list. These are the sports with the highest increase in cost. And men win in terms of the highest individual entries, basketball and football, with growth at over $17,000 in both of those per student. So very substantial growth. Now, remember, this isn't a one-year period. We're actually looking at 2015-16 versus 2018-19. We cut off in 19 to avoid all the COVID stuff. We got a couple of other on the men's side that are getting more expensive, tennis and golf. But 6 of our fastest growers are women's sports: riflery, ice hockey, tennis, basketball, squash, and golf. Now let's take a turn back to the more purely academic side. And what I'll do for next month is actually share with you the numbers that we ran, where we show the academic revenue generated, tuition revenue generated, and the associated educational costs and margins that are generated by the students who are also athletes. And we can break that down for you by program, by athletic program, so you can understand which programs tend to have higher academic contribution than others, and also net contribution net of their expenses. So I'm happy to share a little bit of that information. Stay tuned, we'll do it next month. But for those of you who have viewed sports as sort of this thing we do, don't know why we spend so much money on it, that's actually probably not the case at most of your campuses. You're actually getting money from sports. It's subsidizing academics. So back to a program evaluation system. I mentioned markets as part of this, and in that we look at student demand, employment, competition, and degree fit. Let me walk through that for our program of the month. And in this case, we're going to pick human-computer interaction. Now, notice we're on a ranking page. So that's a very important part of a program evaluation system. You'd never want to look at one program at a time in isolation, because you may, first of all, it's very hard to interpret the numbers when you do that. If I told you there are 1,250 Google searches for human-computer interaction, neither you nor I would know offhand if that's a lot or a little. So you need to be able to make comparisons just to understand the data. Second, oftentimes you can find a program that's good, and if you did the analysis, you'd say, oh, this is a good program, we should add it. But without comparators, you don't know if it's the best program you could have added. And you may, in fact, be overlooking a program that's substantially more attractive than the one you happen to look at. So we believe this business of being able to take a wide range of programs and stack rank them is actually very important, so that you can understand the numbers and make sure you're not overlooking something that might be quite attractive. Human HCI, just to walk across, 96th percentile overall, 83rd percentile in terms of student demand. So that's not spectacular, good. Competitive intensity, 96th percentile. That is, it's not very competitive. And employment is at the 92nd percentile. So good job opportunities out there for folks. When we're doing this on the webinar, we don't address degree fit. We don't know which degree level you might be interested in. So we just make them all 50 so that it washes out of the scoring system. So easy way to interpret our numbers, look at the colors. I'm a history major, so this blizzard of numbers began to get to me after a while. So I did colors instead, or in addition to. And so dark green is good, it's 98th percentile or better. Pink is not so great. And so simply put, green is good, red is bad. And importantly, for those of you who may not be able to tell the colors apart, we do have the percentile written in there as well. So that's why we, in a sense, replicate the data.
Hey, Bob, real quick before we jump into the scorecard, we have one quick question about athletics. What is used to determine athletics cost?
It's going to be a combination of coaches and travel primarily.
Oh, I've done some work on this also. It also includes insurance as well as all the equipment.
Yeah. So what I would say too is, if you'd like to dive into that a little bit more, I'm not as well versed in as I should be, but I'd be glad to set up some time with the guy that built this, who can walk you through it chapter and verse. So, we'll follow up with you to make sure that we answer your question correctly and completely. So HCI, student demand is good. Now, notice I didn't say great. We've got one metric here that's really very good in the dark green, international. Google search is average at the 48th percentile, with 7,930 Google searches in the prior 3 months. New student enrollment volume is good, 88th percentile. On-ground completions only 72nd. Online is actually pretty robust here, 95th percentile in online completions by in-market students. And then you sum that up, and the fact that the on-ground is a little, above average but not great, but online is, and you get to the 80th percentile in terms of overall on-ground and online completions. Then you have to ask, what's the trend? And Google's up, but it's only up at the 62nd percentile. Not huge, or not the fastest growing program, but on a percentage basis, it's doing pretty well. It's up 18%. So they're faster growing programs, but all my clients would be glad to find one that's growing 18%. So I wouldn't dismiss that. Now we've got a different issue with new student enrollment. That's actually down quite sharply, down 57%, and completion volumes at 2%. So there's enough disagreement, if you will, amongst the source data that I'd be very cautious about the growth here. And I'd say, frankly, I'm not certain whether this would be growing or not looking into the future. That's the way I would look at it. The numbers are too disparate to have confidence in the growth rate here. In employment, it's an interesting program. It ends up in the 92nd percentile. Not a ton of jobs, right around the average number of jobs for direct prep. A little bit more than that when we look at ACS bachelors. And what are we talking about between direct prep and ACS? So down here at the bottom, you can see percentage in direct prep jobs for this particular program is 7%. So only 7% of students who graduate from this program are going to go into the careers that they're expected to, if you will. That lower rate, by the way, is not uncommon. 80% of programs are going to have fewer than 20% of their graduates go into the field for which they're directly prepared. So that's why we keep track of the things people really do. At least for bachelor's programs, we got very good data from the American Community Survey, where they asked people, what was your undergraduate major? What are you doing now? And how much money are you making? So we really know what a person is doing in their job, not just what a labor market statistician thought they should do. And the numbers become very, very different. So you can see now BLS current employment, when we include those more generalist jobs, is 4,500. That's the 51st percentile, but it's, very substantial number of incremental jobs and incremental job postings as well. What makes this more attractive is the 3-year growth rate and relatively low number of job postings per graduate at 1.7. That's right around average, but very strong wages. $129,000 for bachelor's degree graduates age 30 to 60. Now, what do people actually go do with this degree? And as I mentioned, people don't always do what you'd think they do. So first things first, they become managers. So from a technical background in HCI, they're actually going to go on to become managers, probably mostly in technology, but elsewhere as well. They become software developers. That's pretty predictable. Not so predictable, they become construction managers, civil engineers, sales reps, computer operations, industrial engineers, business operations specialists, miscellaneous engineers, and occupational safety and health techs. So keep this in mind when people want to tell you what somebody's going to do with the degree. Most people don't actually know. And what people are really going to do is often very different from the degree that they have. And that's normal. It's not a bad thing. So how are jobs doing? Well, down 24% year over year, still ahead of those pre-COVID numbers, the March numbers, by a substantial margin. But you can see the trend here is a little disturbing in terms of job postings, just straight down those green lines, if you will. So I would expect we're going to see another drop next month and probably the month after as well. If we look at what the job postings are for, computer systems engineers and architects, not surprising, IT managers, BI analysts, information security analysts, industrial engineers, software assurance, database architects. Even within tech, it's a pretty broad array of different things that you might end up doing with this degree, whether that, ranging from computer systems engineer to data warehousing specialist and document management specialist. We look at competitive intensity. The program actually does quite well, 96th percentile overall. Now, it's got 9 competitors. That's not a lot, 62nd percentile. That's just above average. We've got 1 school that added this program. That's not so great, means competition went up a little bit. Then moving down, median completions is pretty interesting. 32, median program 32. That means a pretty big program. We're talking about a 4-year program. Let's assume most people go through in, on average in 6. So I'm going to have 6 times that many students in order to generate the 32 graduates. So we're talking about a program with 180, 200 students in it. So pretty interesting size program. Now, here's another thing I find really important when I'm evaluating competition in particular. Median program completion change up 9. So the median size of the graduating class here is up 9 units or 38% year over year. So that would suggest there's plenty of demand for seats in this program. Now, the cost per click and completion competition index are a little worrisome. So this is a pretty competitive program, 71st percentile in terms of competitiveness for Google, cost per click, and 80th on the competition index. That Google competition index goes between 0 and 1, with 1 being most competitive. So this is above average. So it's really an interesting, almost a toss-up in terms of whether this is saturated or not. Some of the metrics suggest there's plenty of competition in terms of Google search, but the median program size is very large, and the change in completions would make me quite optimistic. By the way, last but not least, is this an on-ground or an online program? There's only one institution offering it on. Only one offering it online. That's 10% of the 9 schools offering the program, but it's 56% of all completions. So it's pretty clear that this can be successfully offered online. And then degree level. This looks like a bachelor's and master's level program. 39% of enrollment and completions are 39% of completions nationally are at the bachelor's level. 74% of enrollments at the bachelor's level, though. And master's, again, 39% in terms of completions. Much lower percentage in terms of enrollment. 20% of the people enrolled in this program are at the master's level. What is actually out there in the workforce? We can see we've got a little bit of no college and some college, but these are actually pretty low numbers compared to norms. 27% that would be in the workforce without a bachelor's degree at least. I mean, 48% at the bachelor's level and 20% at the master's level. So a relatively high level of education required to play in the space. Now, where are there opportunities? So read this as follows. A darker area is less opportunity. That would mean right now it has higher enrollment per capita. Where it's lighter green, there's more opportunity. And what I see here is we've kind of got the traditional a couple big kind of entities here. California's mediocre. That's Arizona, pretty saturated. Florida, pretty saturated. And let me see, I always get these two confused, but I believe that's Illinois right there, pretty saturated. Opportunities tend to be in more rural states. I always get a geography test when I do this. Yeah, I think that's right. I wouldn't swear to it. This is an example of the demographic fingerprint I was referring to with DEI. And this is actually unusual because this is a program that is very heavily skewed towards men, 75% male, 25% female. So if you're on a campus where you have 60% female and 40% male, interesting program to offer. It might help you attract men to bring that number closer to 50-50. And then after that, it's pretty much tracking the mix of the percentage of students in each of these demographic groups Black is under indexing quite a bit amongst those. I think Black population right now is about 14%. So it's below norm, but the others are about normal for the populations that they represent. And finally, we do this all on one page, and we do that very intentionally so that when you're making decisions, all the data you need about the market can be viewed at one time. You're not shuffling back and forth between documents. And then the color really pops here when you see it all at once. Pretty easy to figure out where the pluses and minuses are. Employment looks good, light green. Competition looks very good, dark green. And student demand is in the blue, 83rd percentile, which to me is kind of a meh. Now, let me explain why I say that, because 83rd percentile is actually doesn't sound bad. But if you're in that program, I would say then you're probably in fairly good shape. It will sustain you. But if you're not in the program, there are going to be better things you can do in terms of student demand. So that's why I say, it's kind of not exciting. If I were offering it new, there are 17% of our programs that are going to be better for you in terms of student demand. And amongst those, you're going to find summer employment and competition is really good too. So I think you could find, if you're looking for a new program, you might well be able to find a better one than this if you don't already offer it. So let's summarize. Growth continues, but just, and the rate of growth is declining fast. After months of double-digit increases, Google search volumes increased only 0.4% year over year, essentially flat. Spring new enrollment fell 5 to 7%, 5% between undergrad and grad. Job postings fell 26% year over year. So we're starting to see real softening again, unfortunately. There are some bright spots. Data science had the fastest year over year enrollment growth at both the bachelor's and master's level. General and operations managers had high growth in job postings. Demand for HCI programs at the bachelor's level is high. It's not spectacular, but it's above average. The online completions international student demand are 97th percentile. Wages are very good. And there are signs that the market's not saturated, but you might be able to find bigger opportunities out there. You may find, by the way, when you look at them, that they're more competitive as well. In D1, men's baseball grew by over 1,000 participants in the 3 years leading up to COVID, and men's basketball, on the other side, had the highest growth in expenses per participant. And I would just say there are some opportunities here in sports to add a sport at relatively low cost that can increase enrollment. And that's it for today. Let me just quick reminder.
Bob, we got a quick question about sports. Somebody wants to know when we'll have updated data for the current years. Because we're looking at
come out with iPads. So
but what we showed today was 2019. So I do believe we do have
we've got much more than that. That's not the reason we're using 2019 is the data is so screwed up as you go through COVID that we're referring back to what I think it was more stable numbers. But our data is through 2021. I don't think we'll see 2022 until tail end of this year. Well, soon. So keep in mind what a program evaluation system is. It's more than just data. It's more than labor markets. It includes data on student demand, competition, degree fit, labor, margins, academic standards, mission, diversity, and importantly, it's got to involve the right people and the right process to make good decisions that will be adopted by the institution. Let me open up the floor, and this is a point in the presentation where we have about 10 minutes to look at a couple of scorecards that are of interest to you. So fire away if there's a program you'd like to have a look at. We'll be glad to share our data with you.
We're actually going to start right in with physical therapy for Paul, just because he said the applications are down 40% this year. So it'd be interesting to see what our data says.
Yep. So I think I've handed the screen off to you. But no, I'm still screen
not quite.
There we go.
Here we go. Awesome. I will share my screen here. We're looking at the rank. I'll go ahead and type in physical therapy and click in really quickly. This is on all award levels, so let's actually score this on the doctorate level.
Yep.
Apparently I can't type today, but that's okay. physical therapy therapists.
Yeah.
Awesome. When I select the program, right before we even dive into the details, we're going to expect to see some strength in all quadrants here. So let's try to define what that strength is by populating the actual scorecard. One of the first things I want to highlight will be actually the degree fit, right? We were talking about this program being a doctorate level program. We can actually break down the completion level here in this chart on the right, and we'll see that nationally 97% of degrees are doctorate. Go ahead.
You're also filtered for doctorate right now, aren't you?
Correct. Yeah. And that will filter the data, but not the national completions by level here. We'll see that there's about 3% bachelor's level completions for some reason nationally. So I'd be curious about who are those institutions, but this does seem to be a more exclusively doctoral level program here from the data. Okay. And then the data is going to be right in front of us. We can see from the student demand section, why is student demand dark green? Why is it strong? We can start identifying some of the dark greens here under the percentiles to bring that to life. Things like Google search volumes are very large for this program. International page views are very large. New student enrollment, on-ground and online completions, and the sum of on-ground completions, all very large. And the reason I'm saying very large is, right, compared to all other programs, the system is going to go ahead and enable that comparative analysis and show you that all of these metrics are above the 96th percentile here.
It's interesting though, when you're looking at this one now, Paul's number for new student enrollment is almost dead on. Down change is 51%. He had 40%.
Wait, that's up, Ned.
Yeah, so he has it down. So it's interesting to see where the data is coming from them.
Yeah, I mean, that's rock hard data. That's data from the National Center for Education Statistics, National Student Clearinghouse, excuse me. So spring would be our most current information there in the 12 months prior. That's very strong growth actually in enrollment. I suspect it's recovery from programs that were semi-shut down and during COVID as reason you're seeing enrollment growth.
Mm-hmm.
But nothing here would suggest there's a problem with student demand.
Nope.
Nope. And we're looking at the size metrics here, dark green, but we're also seeing some dark greens on the growth metrics for Google search volumes, which, in our system, we can actually dive in and see what are the actual keywords growing specifically for physical therapy. We see new student enrollment growing as well, and completion volumes growing all in units. And we see some overall increasing percentages as well here for the percentage change year over year for those metrics. So student demand, very healthy here. Then we look over to the right, and we're going to look at some of the employment metrics that we see. Things like job posting totals nationally for the past 12 months, 56,426, a 93rd percentile value. BLS is going to recognize this as a very large employment field as well, 229,000 people at a 91st percentile. And BLS is also recognizing a significantly large amount of annual job openings. We're also seeing some relative strength for ACS, or American Community Survey, bachelor outcomes here as well. And then the wages are very strong here at the 10th percentile, which we use as a proxy for entry-level wage, which is why it's not being scored under the doctorate scope, right? Something like a mean wage would be a little bit more relevant here at 90,000, which is an 84th percentile mean wage. Okay.
Yeah, I think let's take a look at competition. There's an interesting number there.
Now we're looking at some of the
off of this, right? Go ahead.
Sorry. Sorry. We're looking at some of the metrics under competition. We're going to see some of these pinks here, right? Something like a 99th percentile all of a sudden is pink, right? Because in the scope of competition, we're going to inverse our understanding. The higher the volume, the more competitive it's going to be. So something like 243 campuses with graduates, a 99th percentile value is actually resulting in a -8 here under competitive intensity. We're seeing one institution entered this market. Sorry, one campus entered this market year over year. And then we're going to see some significantly large average and median completions relative to all other programs, 47 average completions and 38 median program completions here. Both.
Now remember, this is at the doctoral level.
Correct.
So 38 completions at the doctoral level is actually quite a lot of completions. And you can see it actually puts it at the 98th percentile. Now that's going to be behind law and what else? Oh, and medicine. But my guess is it's right in the very top once you get past those two enormous programs.
Mhm. And although this is not currently being scored down here, these three metrics at the bottom can speak to the viability of this program, offering online 7% of institutions and 9% of completions are happening online, for a total of about 18 institutions nationally currently offering this program.
Yeah, and online technically with iPads, as I recall, is some are all online, as the course is delivered online. I'm just going to guess that they're not doing 100% of their physical therapy program online. If so, I really don't want to work with that therapist. So it's, remember, it doesn't have to be all online in order to be in that particular segment.
Correct.
There is one worrisome number here that's consistent with the concern. We do have year-over-year median program completions down 1. Now that's a small enough variation when you're on a base of 38 that it could just be kind of noise. But it is an indicator that it's the only really worrisome indicator here in terms of student demand and filling classrooms.
Correct. And for the iPads, it's we're leveraging the distance education numbers. It's 80% of the course load or more is offered online for this calculation here. So that's going to be physical therapy. I think the next one was occupational therapy. Correct.
Ned?
Yep, OT's next.
Okay.
And keep in mind, we are showing you kind of the one-stop shop scorecard where all of the metrics are brought into one place. Our system is capable of giving you the deep dives, right, into who are these campuses, how have they changed year over year or in the past 5 years. What are these Google search volumes? How are they trending year over year? What are these job postings? Who are the people who are currently offering these job postings? What are the skills that are trending up? So there's a lot more that we can take on in terms of diving deeper into this data. But this is going to be kind of that first stop to get that macro level view of what's happening in the market currently for this program across these different buckets. When we're looking at something like occupational therapy now, we're going to see somewhat of a similar story here, right? We're seeing strength in student demand. This is blue, so the blue might not look as pretty as the green, but it's still an 86th percentile. So there is some significant strength here in the employment field. And then we're going to see a dark green for competitive intensity. Now, we're going to try and digest the whys here. But before I do that, look at how all of a sudden this program is more of a master's level completing program at 73% masters here. So it's a little different than the physical therapy program that we were just looking at. Okay. We're going to look at student demand and see 154,000 Google search volume. This is going to be a 90th percentile Google search volume. So significant interest here in terms of the Google search volume. We see new student enrollments at 38, on ground and online completions, both at the 98th and 99th percentile. And then the sum of on ground and online completions at the 98th percentile here. So significant size here in terms of student demand. And we're also seeing some positive trends with the growth associated with these metrics under student demand. The most significant being completion volume has increased by 481 year over year. And then we're going to dive down here and look at competitive intensity. And keep in mind, we are in the doctorate level here. So, if I was reviewing this with someone and I noticed that 73% of the completions were at the master's level, I might come in here and change the rubric to a master's level rubric because these completions that we're looking at here will be for doctorate, right? So when we're seeing something like 138% increase in enrollment volume, that will be specific to the doctorate level completions here, which is pretty significant. Then we see 68 campuses with graduates. That's a 97th percentile total. 10 more campuses, I keep saying institutions, entered this market year over year into doctorate space. That's a 99th percentile unit increase change here. So it's one of the most significant growth volumes related to campuses entering the market. And then we're looking at 18 and 11 here for average and median completions, with the median completion sizes actually increasing, which is a different story than what we were just looking at with physical therapy. And this program tends to be a little bit more viable online. The reason I say that is because the percentages of institutions that offer this program online and the percentage of completions happening online are significantly higher than that physical therapy program that we were looking at. Job posting totals,
But yeah, we're coming up to the end of the hour, so we should probably wrap up.
can wrap up here. Thank you, everyone. And if there's any questions, please reach out to us and we're happy to, get some of these scorecards out. for
One
you.
quick update, due to the Christmas holiday season, we will be having this webinar also a week early. There will be on Tuesday, the 20th and Wednesday, the 21st for our community college one, if you would like to hear about specific community college programs. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.